Welcome to Negotiate This. My name is Nick Segal. This is episode 7, and today we're going to talk about claiming your value. Today, I've got a tremendous guest that I'm thrilled to introduce to you all in a moment. One thing that I really encourage you to consider as you're listening into this conversation, know that you can, if you put it in caps, I'll see it more easily. On the chat, in the open chat, you can pose a question to either myself or to Neyshia Go, my guest today, and then we will do our best to get to that. Consider your value for a moment. Consider how much time you've invested in really understanding what your value is. With Neyshia, we're going to talk about her discovery process in that. Then also we're going to look at how we apply our claimed value to each and everything that we do, not just business, but in our relationships and in our lives. So without further ado, I want to introduce Neyshia to you all. Neyshia is, I'm going to say, wise beyond her years because she's not even 30 years old yet. And Neyshia is, in my opinion, and by independent statistic, one of the absolute top selling brokers, real estate brokers in Los Angeles. This is a dynamic, competitive marketplace, and Neyshia has excelled in a very, very short period of time, although she's been doing it for almost 10 years now. She is also one of the stars of CNBC's Listing Impossible, and I have the utmost of respect for her, and you will too as we get started. So Neyshia, welcome to Negotiate.
Thank you. Thank you for that grandiose introduction. It's really made my day. I just feel like, can you walk around with me all day?
Every day, all day. Well, this is being recorded, by the way, so those of you that miss it, you can just keep playing that back. But you've earned every aspect of that accolade. And what we're talking about today of claiming your value is because you put in the work. And I'm just going to pose the first question. Did you always have the level of confidence and understanding about what your value is the way you have it now? Has there been an exploration of that?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I did not know what my value was when I started in this business. Little background on me. I'm from Northern California, so I don't actually have any firmly planted roots here. I don't have any family down here. I moved here for college, obviously Asian American descent. And I feel it's important to touch on that because the background that I grew up on was not very salesy. I was not really taught at a very young age to be really direct. And I think for sure that part of that shaped who I was, but also shaped some of the obstacles I needed to overcome as far as being confident in myself and my value proposition in sales. I was a performer. I sang a lot on stage, so that helped me. But it wasn't something that I felt I could easily translate until much later in my experience as far as my value. In fact, most of my career, I've deflected the fact that I used to be a performer and I used to sing because I didn't want that to get in the way of, I'm a real estate agent, take me seriously, XYZ. But then I realized, wait, I can use that. And so, between music, between growing into who I am, between years now of sales experience, I've realized what I bring to the table and I own it.
Yeah, and just to stay with that evolution for a moment, part of the cultural dynamic of where you came from. I mean, in America, we go, hey, look at me, I'm the best thing since sliced bread, right? Asian culture, not so much. So there's a belief system that you had to overcome from that as well. Tell me a little bit about that dynamic, because I believe everybody listening in has a series of beliefs about whether they can or they can't, and overcoming that is part of the equation, right?
Yes. My family, God bless them, I love them to death. I'm an only child, first of all, so that's a lot of added pressure already, right? Only child, Asian American family. I did everything from tennis, golf, piano, everything. So I was expected to do well or excel in everything. So there's a very quiet pressure there. But then on top of that, I was always taught never to boast, never to always downplay, underplay myself. So that was something that going into sales of any kind is sort of completely a contradiction to the way I grew up, right? I mean, even to this day, if somebody like if my dad is, and I love him to death, but if my dad hears a compliment about me, or somebody says something, or your daughter's done so much, he goes, she works really hard, and she's doing her best. There's always a downplay aspect to that, and there's nothing bad about that, but it was something that I had to overcome in order to be myself. If that makes sense.
And so what is that process? How do you start to overcome that? Only child, your dad's adoration and love and acceptance are all part of that equation, right? So how do you start to become your own person in that evolution?
Well, I have always been really introspective. So part of that evolution for me was being able to periodically, and also trying every day, to look within myself and ask myself very important questions, which is, what do I want? What version of myself do I want to present to the world? Do I want to be? And where am I going? And once I started to become more clear in those veins, in those aspects, I think I was able to really start to realize, I am X, Y, and Z. Let me use those to my advantage, and don't force it. Part of one of the things that I always was really hard on myself was, I didn't feel like I was tough enough. I didn't feel like I was, direct, and I'd been around agents and on calls, and they were just, I'll just say it, they were kind of assholes. And I just said, why can't I have that direct conversation with my client? But then I realized I don't have to be an asshole. I can be firm, and I can have facts, and I can present it in a way that's effective for me. And understanding that that's what I find valuable in myself, and that's what I find valuable in a presentation of information and trying to negotiate something. Well, that made me more confident, and it made me a much stronger person and agent because of it.
Yeah, and when you say effective for me, I'm gonna check out. Is there an authenticity underneath it that if it comes from that authentic resonance of who you are, is that part of that effective dynamic that works for you?
100%, because if you are in your element, and if you're authentic, and if you use what your strengths are, then it just gives you that much more conviction and ability to present, right? Because at the end of the day, you believe what's coming out of your mouth. You can tell when someone doesn't buy their own bullshit.
Right.
And it feels gross and slimy and unauthentic. And I think that for me, the biggest part of the business that I try to work on and try to present to my clients is integrity.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as you look at the building of your foundation of your value proposition and really coming to terms with it inside of yourself, you talked about past experience and applying that to present reality, like singing and performing. I mean, there are times when we're out in front of people, right? And we need to be presenting ourselves. And those skill sets that you created and earned at that time, why, deflect those when those can become part of your asset class and your wealth? So when did you make that shift? Because and before I have you answer the question, for people to consider, our past is our wealth, the mistakes, where we fell on our asses, the ability to look back at that, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of, how do I learn from this? So one, I don't repeat it, but moreover, that I can then use it as part of my wealth to then become part of that armor and that fabric of the essence of who I am and that value proposition. So now the answer to your question.
I became more confident and more aware, I think, when I started to really, really find a new gratification in my transactions. And I'm going to elaborate on that because that's ambiguous. I have had some of the hardest deals that anybody I know has ever done. And for me, finding solutions, racking my brain, and then actually leading, getting those deals to close, or getting the positive outcome. For me, that was really empowering. And so when that happened for me, I think it started to make me realize what my value was, and it made me more comfortable to then explore, well, you know what? I was able to be successful for the reasons X, Y, and Z. It's who I am, right? And so then I started to accept, okay, well, how do I elaborate and actually use that in a listing presentation, or the next time I deal with, something that's problematic, in order to have a good outcome. And I think that it probably happened for me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when I had a string of really difficult deals. And from there, once I closed them, I said, you know what? I can do this, and then I started to really own who I was. I'm not saying that everyone has to go through really difficult deals to find their power. But I think for everyone, there's probably a catalyst and there's a trigger point. And I mean, kind of what better one than a pandemic right now, right?
Mm.
To make us all look within ourselves and say, what makes me authentic, and what are people going to what's going to resonate with people?
Yeah, so we talked about this yesterday a little bit, and I'd love you to expand on this, Neyshia, the idea that the 3 ways to really look at, three ways that people are dealing with this pause, the pandemic pause. And you broke it down really well. And just to cue it up, the first one is people go into kind of this apathetic, I'm not doing anything, right? So would you elaborate on what we talked about yesterday?
Of course. So this period of time, I think, is very definitive. It's also really interesting because, you can handle it one of 3 ways. You can look at it one of 3 ways. And I see the way people are reacting, and I think there are 3. You can either run through this like a chicken with your head cut off, freaking out and anxiety, trying to force square pegs into round holes, which are now round holes because things changed in the last 2.5 months. And then I see people who are really kind of apathetic, dare I say a little lazy, are taking this time to just kind of do nothing about, the situation. And then for me, I've taken the time to work on myself, work on my business strategy, ask myself questions about where I'm going and how I'm going to achieve those goals with our new normal. And so I think one of the most important things and I've been talking to both clients, friends, and even real estate agent partners, is, are you taking advantage of this time to actually take advantage of the quiet in order to look within yourself and find out what you really want?
Mm. Yeah, and I echo that option C, the ability to really slow down enough to evaluate current realities in relationship to the realities that I want to create, and then start to see, all right, if we work backwards, if that's the reality that I want to create, how do I then take where I am today and start building those blocks to getting there? So
Exactly.
yeah,
I will say that the first 2 weeks, I kind of felt like a kid that was on summer break, because nobody knew, like, it was quiet. No one was doing anything. I was watching TV. I was going to bed at 3 in the morning. You know this. I was going to bed at 3 and 4. I was like, I have nothing better to do. It's like summer break. And then 2 weeks later, I was like, all right, I'm not happy just doing nothing. So what can I do that's productive, that fosters growth into who I can become, or who I am, and in my journey, and take advantage of this time? Because for once, I didn't have 80 phone calls and 200 emails happening, and it gave me time to rest and grow at the same time. It was restorative, in my opinion.
Yeah, and what I would encourage anybody who feels like they've missed the boat of the ability to, that this time is over. This time is not over. We're in this new normal for a period of time, and at any given moment, like any new habit that we create, we can start today to become introspective, to really consider our values. So as we continue this discussion, for those of you listening, engagement happens anytime and in any moment you choose it to happen. So there was a question that came across, what's a really hard deal, Neyshia, in terms of, and how do you handle hard deals? So top 3 suggestions from that perspective.
Okay, what's a really hard deal? A hard deal is where everything is going wrong as far as let's say the house is basically falling apart. There's issues that weren't disclosed, expectations aren't being met. All of a sudden, there's a lot of wrenches that get thrown in there. Maybe there's neighbors all of a sudden trying to stop the sale. I once had a deal. It was a large deal, 5 days before closing. Somebody filed a cloud on title to stop the close. And all this was happening is we were trying to destage a 20,000 square foot house, and in a matter of 4 days, because the buyer said, I want to close like that. And time is of the essence. If somebody says they want to close like that, you try to close like that. So we had to deal with a Liz pendants and destaging 20,000 square feet, and previous sellers trying to break into the property to steal items. And what else happened? And then at the very end, there were a couple 2,000-pound statues that nobody figured out how to move, and the moat in between the property had broken. So I'm getting all these calls trying to deal with the real estate aspect and then the minutia of it. And I think that as far as the best 3 ways to deal with it, I think you analyze the situation from an objective point of view, right? And you try to keep cool as much as you can. You try to find a solution. You move on from that, and then you just keep trucking through the deal. To me, and you also don't let it eat you up inside, because at the end of the day, they will work out or they won't. I think also it's just being patient with the process, and also trying to work in a positive way to find a solution. I think too many times agents get very egoistic, and I don't think it's just real estate agents. I think anybody, they start to overagent a deal, and they forget that at the end of the day, we're middlemen trying to work towards the same outcome, which is a buyer buying a property and a seller selling the property, and we're not at odds. So I think also keeping a really good relationship with all parties involved as much and as best as you can is probably one of the most important aspects.
And there are a couple of, there's a question that's come up that I think plays right to it as part of the solution. The top 2 personal skills you've developed in order to do deals at the level you are, and as a subset of that, is there a difference between a $2 million deal and a $20 million deal as you get to solution?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I think generally the same principles apply, but I think with higher end properties, the problems are a little bit different. You're not dealing with, I don't think you're dealing with moats breaking on a $2 million property and, destaging a 20,000 square foot house and somebody trying to steal Swarovski crystal drapes in the middle of the night. Like, I don't think you're dealing with that. But
right.
But sometimes the problems or the issues that you do have to deal with on a $2 million deal is educating a very emotional home buyer on their first purchase. And that is a new set of problems, not problems, but a new set of obstacles to overcome that don't necessarily relate to a $20 million buyer. But what I have found is that everybody assumes that $20 million buyers and sellers are rich, and so they're not cheap. And that is the biggest misnomer. They might be more cheap, in my opinion, than the person that's buying the $1 or $2 million house.
Right. Okay. So let's shift gears for a minute now. So you've established your value proposition. One follow-up question. After an interaction, after a presentation that you do you take a pause? Do you have any sort of technique where you evaluate, we'll call it your performance, your presentation in the quiet of your own mind, to really evaluate what worked, what didn't work, and where the learnings are in that?
100%. Usually it happens as soon as I get in my car and shut the door.
So that's ritualistic for you.
ritualistic. I can't get my mind off. I mean, it's not going to not happen, you know? I think for me, it definitely is always, as soon as I shut the door of my car, I start thinking about what this person said. Did I address this the way I should have? That one question I need to find an answer to. I start to analyze what worked, what didn't, what might have been a trigger point, where, and you know, it's definitely very, 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 very important to listen and be observational during a presentation, because body language can change, you know, someone's voice can change, and I think it's really important to pick up those cues. And so, for example, I think thank God for Zoom during this time, because conference calls on the phone or listing presentations on the phone and listing presentations on email, like any kind of conversation that, you know, you need to sort of take cues. You should never do that without being able to see a person or hear a person's voice. So I think that, you know, after an appointment, I definitely take time to reflect.
And is part of your value proposition that if there is something that was either left unsaid or an incomplete or a lack of clarity, that you can, as you're sitting in your car going, I'm not quite sure what's next on that, how do you deal with that to maintain the authenticity and the integrity of the relationship?
Well, if I don't know something, I'll just tell them honestly that I don't.
If you're in your car and you're going, wait a minute, I'm not quite sure how we left either an aspect of the discussion or a next step, or a lack of clarity inside of you from making a clear direction, how do you deal with that? Because God forbid made you feel stupid, right? I should have figured that out. There's that whole self-talk thing. How do you deal with it?
Well, I always follow up, obviously, because I always try to have another conversation to see if there's some kind of clarity I can gain from the follow-up conversation. But as far as, you mean like beating myself up for something that happened?
Well, if you just don't have a clear direction as to what the next step is, or that maybe you just missed something, do you potentially go back to that client almost immediately, almost even pop out of the car and say, hey, wait a minute, you know, there's one more thing I want to follow up with to make sure that I'm clear about what my next action step is? Because ambiguities create tremendous discord in deals, right? In any type of deal. And when you're clear about it, it's easier to proceed with it. So I'm just wondering how you handle your humanness in the moment, if perhaps there's been a mistake.
I will, without sounding crass and saying this, I do my best to avoid that at all costs. I am very regimented in that I have action steps. And so I have a follow-up process with them. We talk about the next steps. If we don't, and you know, in the rare occasion that there isn't any, I follow up and I reach out to that person and I see what our next steps are. And I don't necessarily do it like in that moment. I'll usually take a pause so that I can also come back very level-headed and very systematic with the way I approach them.
So that's really, so much of your value proposition is your ability to organize and systematize how you conduct your business. I mean, it's a tremendous asset for you.
Yeah, I think definitely early on in my career, especially working with Aaron Kerman, he and I are really complement to each other in the way that I am very regimented and systematized, and he'll tell you he's a broader picture idea man. And not to say that I'm not either, but I like to be very clear about where we're going, the next steps. I like to inform my clients. I like to educate them, because in my experience, a client that feels like they are there with you in the process makes for a much better client down the line.
Got it. All right. So you have a value proposition. You've overcome belief systems that we don't promote, you know, grandiosely ourselves. In this new world, as we come back online, how are you presenting your value proposition? What are the top 3 things that you're doing right now to present the value of Neyshia Go?
I am distilling down, I think. First of all, I want to be very honest and say that I'm trying to distill those those things down to 3, because I think it's easy for us to say, well, I did this and I do that, and which one is worth more, which one is more valuable as far as how I'm going to present it. But I think of the 3, my work ethic is definitely one of them. My work ethic and determination, and the fact that I've stayed really active even in this market during a pandemic, I think is one of them.
So staying with that for just a second. So how do you demonstrate that work ethic?
I have stayed in very good contact with my clients. I have done huge follow-up campaigns with them. I also just like to pick up the phone and talk to them. And I like to put pieces together. And I've been able to make some deals happen that have been very, 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 very challenging. And, but I think a demonstration of work ethic to clients is communicating and finding new solutions. So for example, in a world where we can't do showings, what can we do? We can do virtual tours. We can do FaceTime. It's like finding the new solutions and technology that demonstrate that I'm not just going to be complacent with where we are. You know, and I know some people don't like to show property, but I've been showing property, you know, with a mask on. So I think that has been evidentiary to my clients that I haven't stopped since this happened.
Right. And what else are you doing to demonstrate your value and promote it?
I'm sorry?
To promote it. And is that a work in progress? I mean, listen, we're coming out of a whole brand new perspective, but where are you at in your process with promoting Neyshia from that value proposition?
I have taken some steps as far as figuring out what my value proposition is during this crisis. And it's interesting because I thought I knew exactly what it was until I started fleshing it out on paper and then realized I didn't know exactly what it was, because I normally just walk into a listing appointment and I have a general idea of what I'm going to say. But then I started thinking during this time, is there more that I can actually bring up that's more powerful? And parts of that were experience and results driven experience. So I don't usually actually talk about that in my appointments, and I realized, why am I not talking about that? So some of the stories that I'm sharing are now things that I've been incorporating which resonate with people. And I think that has been really powerful. I think also as far as promoting myself, I've just tried to be a human being through all of this. I think that's really important.
And do you consider that a courageous act to show more of your humanness?
Yeah, because it's vulnerability, isn't it? And I'm not really a very vulnerable or like willingly vulnerable person. But I think that sharing an experience and humanness and the things that we're going through, both positive and negative during this time and just in life in general, is a very powerful connecting point. And I think, I know that in any successful close or transaction or meeting with a client, you find a connection point. And finding out who I really am in all of this and how I can connect to someone during this time is the most powerful thing, because people are scared and people are concerned and people don't know what the outcome is. And the thing is, I'm very honest. I do not know what's going to happen. Right? But I'm not going to bullshit and say, yeah, the market's going to fly or the market's going to tank. It's like, look, historically, evidentiary, like this is where we are, but what do you want? Right? I try to listen to them. What do my clients want? What can I provide to them? What can I do for them? And I think that humanness has helped me build and rekindle other relationships also with clients, past referral sources that are working out well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a very powerful dynamic. I mean, anybody looking at you, if they didn't know you, you're polished, you're beautiful, you're professional, it's almost intimidating. So the more you can bring the humanistic the vulnerability of it, obviously you're not weeping. It's just a human dynamic and a compassionate dynamic. You become that much more valuable and impressive because you're showing all aspects of you in the process.
Right. And I mean, I like to have fun. I like to have a good laugh. And any appointment I'm at, if we're not laughing at least a little bit, I think something's wrong. And so, I went to an appointment really recently and she said, wow, I can't believe you're wearing these high heels, because that's kind of my thing. And I said, yeah, I've been stuck inside so long. I think my shoes must have thought I died or something. But here I am, and it's great for me to be able to show up to an appointment. And I take a lot of pride in the way I present myself. And what I also realized during this pandemic is why not hearken on that? Why not touch on that? The way I present myself is how I represent you. It's how I represent property. The level of care that I put in myself is what I put into the work that I do.
Great, I love it, and I'm acknowledging the questions. I see them. I'm staying on a train of thought here, and we will get to them as we have time. So be patient, please. So I look at the new reality as we're going to be met and present to an audience that the three primary dynamics. One, dollars are precious, and people expending their dollars, they're going to be far more judicious. Our competition, so that's number one. Our competition has gotten much stiffer because there are fewer opportunities and there are more people still engaged with them. And I don't care what your business dynamic is. We're all faced with that reality. And number three, those that have not claimed their value and that don't know how to articulate and stand behind it are going to do short-term seductions, as we'll call it, to compromise their value and thus try and be seductive with cheaper pricing and more grandiose offerings with no substance. How are you dealing with that and met by that audience? Any thoughts on that?
I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm going to stay true to who I am, and I'm going to arm myself and educate myself so I can better educate my clients. But I don't really care, and I never really have cared about what other people around me are doing in the sense of how their techniques and what they're saying and necessarily how much they're producing. To me, it's always been about my own growth. And so for me, even though I know that this is going to become our new reality, I think use that. And when I say use, I don't mean use. I say utilize that to your advantage. So for example, dollars are going to be much more precious. Well, I ask people then, so what's really important to you? Do you want a new house? Do you want a beach house? Do you want to get rid of this house so that you can put it away into, what are your goals, right? And so it's almost like educating your clients into thinking about themselves and their own value proposition. What's valuable to them. And then from there, you actually have a very transparent, open relationship. And I think for me, that's what's always helped me, is trying to understand what people really want and listening and hearing them. And I think not just trampling over what I think they want, or, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And also it sounds like you're creating a space for discovery in a meeting, because I truly believe that we don't sell anything, we educate. But we got to know what the subject matter is first before we can speak to it. And the subject matter so often is understanding what a client's need is or are. And our ability then, using our experience and our depth of knowledge, to then address that and educate them. Well, if you want this, here are the options as to how to get there. But that comes from experience, right? But it also comes from a faith in yourself to say, I need to let them go through their discovery process so they get to what is the crystallized aha of what they truly need, so then you can deal with that.
Well, I want to draw on an example of something that's currently happening.
Great.
Because I think it's all about being honest and being truthful and having them go through the process of discovery. I listed a property for a client, and she was going to build it and develop it, but with everything going on, she feels like she needs to cash out and get the money out of the property. But she spends her weekends there, even though she doesn't live there currently because it's kind of a project, but she loves you can tell she loves the property. And you know, we're not getting as much activity as I want, and there's a bottom line that she's got to sell it. And I'm considering, you know, definitely going to her and saying, maybe you should just keep it, you know, enjoy it. If this is what you love, let's try to find a way for you to keep the house, right? And for your soul to be happy. Because when I look at the bottom line, actually the numbers are not that big. And so there might be another solution. I'm happy to work that out with her. The thing is, there comes that commission breath, which we talked about earlier, but we can talk about it now. I don't have any in that situation, right? I'm like, I don't even want it. Let's try to find the best outcome for you in your situation. Because
Commission breath is not a good thing?
commission breath is definitely not a good thing.
Okay, just so, for those that may not be familiar with the term. Okay, yeah.
It's worse than garlic, fish, everything else you could eat and then breathe on somebody. No, look, obviously commission breath, just to further elaborate, is when you're so invested in the sale because you need that commission that it actually comes off to clients and people around you, and it is the most off-putting, and it smells like desperation. So you know, this is a situation where we're in a pandemic and we're in a crisis, and obviously every dollar that we earn right now is precious, and not that it wasn't before, but even just that much more. And yet I'm sitting here thinking, she's a long-term client, and she'll appreciate that I thought of her before myself in this situation.
Do you work with short-term clients, churn them and burn them?
I try not to. Most of my clients are long-term clients. I've transacted multiple times. Some of them I've worked with for 8 or 9 years, on like 5, 6, 7, 8 transactions. And those are people that, you know, invite me over to their house for dinner, that we have conversations that have nothing to do with real estate. And the beauty in this business is when you find that point of connection with someone, and also a level of trust, like where my clients actually ask me, what should I do? It's really empowering.
Mm. Is part of your value proposition defining the types of clients you choose to spend your time with?
Yes. So that is something that I've started to analyze during this time. And I'm gonna say this. When you start out as an agent, you take any client that you can get, right? You just take any.
In any walk of life, in most professions, yeah. As you get started, you know, I had a soccer coach that says you got to kiss ass until you can kick it.
Yeah.
So okay, go huh?
It's a good analogy. So when you start out as an agent, you take any client you can get. You take the one that's working with 7 other brokers. You take the one that may or may not go around you. I mean, you take any client you can get. You can take the one that's almost bipolar in the way they communicate.
I've had some of those clients, yes.
Exactly. We all have. And what I've started to do is use the grading scale for clients. And I had never really had the time. I had sort of mentally, internally done it, but it's not the same as actually writing it out and color coding them, you know. And I think it's like green, yellow, red, and you know, or you could say A, B, and C. The point is, you have certain clients that you know are going to transact, that are reasonable, that are rational. Then you have some clients that are like wishy-washy. Should I spend my time with them? C clients are like, probably never going to buy, but they're referral source. And then what you need to decide is, what is my value and how much of my time should I dedicate to that person? If they're an A client because they're loyal, because they're going to transact, because they're a friend, because you know that that's a good relationship, then you should invest your time in them. But C clients, I don't really have a desire really much to work with them. So then it becomes, what do you do with them? You know, you decide. But I think it's really important, and it's very empowering to know your value and how you're dedicating your time to those people. Because if they're going to time sucks, time vampires, those terrible people that you will never end up having, it's not even about the money, it's even having a pleasant relationship with, then don't waste your time. Focus on getting another A client.
Mm. Well, and again, it starts with the time you invest in the quiet of your own mind to consider what's truly value to you, how you want to express it, and then who you want to share it with for the highest return, depending on what's at stake, right? So what I'm hearing again and again, the consistency is the time to invest to make sure what's really clear about what your value is?
Well, the only thing that you can't make more of in life is time, right? So you can't get any more, you can't create any more. You know, you can make money, you can invent other things, but you cannot get any more time back. So I've started to be very choosy with not just work relationships, but friendships and relationships. And I think it doesn't mean dump all your friends, but it means, am I gaining something of emotional value, right? Is this person, you know, I think we've all had friends at some point in our lives where at a certain point you realize that they're actually not adding anything fulfilling or positive to your life. In fact, they're taking away because they're takers. You know, some people in life are takers. And it's a really good opportunity and time to actually analyze your friendships and your relationships and be able to prioritize what's most important.
So let's talk about the show for a minute. So you did
Okay.
season 1, CNBC, Listing Impossible. My wife and I loved it. We lapped them up and had great fun with you and Aaron and the team on every respect. So that is the world, right? That is the glitz and the glamour. How do you translate your value proposition onto a platform like that?
I think through the show, look, it's TV, so you don't see everything. But I think that you do see at least a little bit, in my opinion, of who I am, which is I'm pretty direct, I'm pretty straight to the point, I'm pretty, you know, I'm working constantly, I'm really dedicated to what I, you know, in what I do. And I think that the advice that I give in the show and the care that I give to my clients is a direct correlation of who I am as a person and agent. And I think that as far as what I hope that the show teaches people, as far as, you know, who I am and my value, is that I'm honest, just like Aaron is, but I'm honest as well. I mean, for all intents and purposes, he is my mentor. You know, I started as his intern when I was 20 years old. So, you know, I think
that's testimony, by the way, that you guys are still together in many respects. So
who would have thought?
yeah, that's
Probably
great.
his longest lasting relationship.
So please continue. Sorry, I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So the show, let's say there's a storyline, and the show wants you to start to compromise the value of who you are. Season 2's coming. How are you going to deal with that?
I'm not doing it. That's it. I had an opportunity a long time ago when I was actually 16, and I was offered a record deal I'm half Filipino in the Philippines, and I didn't take it because I thought, you know, even though it was a lot of money at the time and it was a good experience, I didn't want to compromise what I thought was going to be, you know, a life here in the United States. If that makes sense. And so for me, it was like having a normal high school, college experience was more important to me. So as far as how I look at TV, it doesn't define me. It never has. It's not that important to me. I think it's a great platform to share a message. And my message is that, you know, if you work really, really hard, it doesn't matter if you were born with a silver spoon or had a book of clients that your dad passed down to you, you can make it happen. And the best way to do that is to be true to yourself and to be true to your clients and to have integrity and to work hard. That's my message, and I hope that reads. And if anything is going to deter me away from that, it's just not who I am, and it's not something I'm going to be a part of. People who know me really well know that I am very, very bad at bullshitting. Like if I don't want to do something, I don't want to do it. You're going to know. You know, I'm actually almost like a terrible liar because I just don't like to do things that aren't authentic to who I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So is it a fun experience doing that show?
It is fun, but it's also really tiring. I'm just going to be honest, because you've got 2 full-time jobs. You know, you're on set from like 8 a.m. to 6 or 7 p.m. on set, being on location. And then I'm trying to work all, you know, in between that. And somebody asked me once, I think they interviewed me while we were doing the show, how I was able to manage my clients during that process. And I said, I don't think most of them really felt anything because I just kept working harder and longer. And I had a team, I had a couple of assistants around me who helped pull some of the weight, but that just meant I went to bed at like 11 or midnight. And it wasn't, it's hard, but at the same time, what I'm thinking of now is come season 2, I'm definitely going to have more people in place who can touch those things and take some of the responsibility that I don't need to do, so that it can just make for a more pleasant experience without taking away from the quality of the work that I provide.
So it sounds like you're building a team and a platform, an architecture of your own personal business, so that it gives you the ability then to spend more time investing in the show and or other things that you want to do. I
am, and I spent this time through the last month, 2 months, 3 months. I don't even know how long we've been in quarantine anymore. I've taken this time to think about all the other side projects that I want to do, because I don't just want to broker real estate for the rest of my life, personally. And some people might, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, it's not everything I want to do. And trying to find and slate time has been one of my biggest challenges. I'll be very open with that. So for me right now, I've been trying to figure out, how can I make myself more efficient without sacrificing quality of work, so that I can do some of the other things I want to do in my life.
And has your defining your value proposition assisted you with the confidence too that I can achieve that? I not only am I good at what I do or my value is, but I'm worth going for more of what I want in my life because I've taken the time to really claim my value.
100%. And I think when you really start to figure out what you want and that you deserve it, everything then in your life passes through sort of this veil of discernment. Is this particular person, is this particular client, is this particular situation, is this in line, is this traveling on a parallel course with where I want to go, or is it actually derailing me? And then you start to become choosy with the people, the clients, the transactions, the things that come into your life. And it's a really empowering thing, because you know the value of yourself. You're able to actually say, no, I'm not going to do that, because you're just going to be a time suck.
So we talked about, we're going to bring forward the Jade Mills story. Okay. So here's a reference point for you all. And there's some questions that are coming up. How do you deal with developers? How do you deal with overpriced listings? When do you walk away? I think this little story and anecdote will put a bow on all those. So share that story, would you? And for context, Jade Mills is one of the most well-respected, powerful real estate agents in the Los Angeles area, with probably a global recognition. Right?
In the country, yeah, she's incredible. I respect her a lot. I have a good working relationship with Jade.
So as a role model, so roll out this story.
She's a role model. So I heard this story, and essentially someone had called a client and was talking about a commission reduction. And she said, I'm just sorry, I can't do that. Jade Mills is expensive. And I thought, fuck. I mean, honestly, that takes some major huevos to say that, but that was just like, it was so badass that when I heard that, I was like, when am I going to be able to say Neyshia Go is expensive? So it's sort of something that I'm working towards, and I think I'll get there.
Right. But I love the technique of speaking about yourself in the third person, right?
Yeah. That takes a lot of balls.
It does indeed. And yet, Jade is, what she's demonstrating is, that's my value proposition. I am expensive because I'm worth it, right? And so wouldn't it be great if we all, when challenged with that dilemma of, there are business decisions that we make along the way, but commission reductions is a very acute moment in time where it's like, I can take 80% of something or 100% of nothing. And how do I play to that? So how do you play to that?
Well, it's interesting because also it's a very, very tangible way to define your value. Literally, somebody's putting a dollar amount on your value.
Mm.
And look, I'll be honest. I'm gearing towards a place where I'm less flexible because my value is, in my eyes, great enough where I don't deserve a reduction, and the service that I provide doesn't. But look, if you're at a standstill and a point where a certain percentage is going to make or break the deal, I still believe that half of something is better than all of nothing. So it's sort of trying to find a balance in the sort of business / what your value is. But I've definitely taken a different approach over the last couple of years. I'm not willing really to give reductions because I know the service that I provide and the results that I provide is worth it.
Well, and what you're also doing is you're creating enough business for yourself that you're not at the mercy of any one deal. I think that's the big dilemma. If you haven't created anything else, you put all your eggs in that basket. If you have a system in place and you have an architecture and a game plan, you create more opportunities, and that you're not beholden to any one of them. It sounds like that's the evolution that you've risen to.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't until a few years ago when I fired my first client that I started to really own my value. Because and I fired the client because he was just a terrible human being. I mean, he was really rude, he was really aggressive, and also he had me do things in the transaction knowing that I had to do them, serving notices 2 days before and just being very aggressive that I didn't want to do. And I said, this isn't really true to myself. I have to do them because I represent you, but after this, I can choose not to represent you anymore.
So let's bring this to a close with this pandemic has affected all of our perspectives on our lives. How has this pandemic affected your perspective? Where are you investing more of your energy? What's more important to you beyond just business, and what becomes less important to you? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
So the pandemic has made me very introspective about where I want my life to go, and especially refining my 5-year plan. And then also realizing now that time and life is just really precious, both in the morbid sense, but also just in the value sense. I was having a conversation recently with a co-agent of mine, and she said to me that, oh, this was so terrible. And there was a young person that was a family friend who passed away. And I said, do you ever notice, I said, it's terrible and it's so sad, but do you ever notice how people are always really upset when life is taken too young, right? But not as much so when they're 80 or 90 and they've lived a good life. Well, I think we should always live our lives, no matter how old we are, knowing that life is precious and time is precious, and to be discerning and to be choosy about the things that we do, the people that are involved in our lives, because we don't get that time back. And so what I've done during this pandemic is just figured out where I want my life to go and the direction that I want it to take. And a lot of it has to do with my business. And just making sure that I look at everything, even if it's just for a split second, and say, is this in line with who I am, where I'm going, and what I want to accomplish? Mm-hmm. And I don't think that if I hadn't had the time to slow down and do that, I would not be anywhere near as conscious of that now.
And so what do you give up? What no longer makes the grade for Neyshia Go as you go forward?
Certainly relationships, friendships, clients that are not authentic, right? I think, and not just authentic, but are also selfish. I think that it relates to both friendships, relationships, and then also clients. Like if a seller is not really a real seller, a legitimate seller, I think at this point I'm looking at it and saying, I wish you well, and I think that's a big part of making sure that you spend your time wisely.
So in closing, if you're talking to, you're mentoring a young entrepreneur And I consider real estate agents entrepreneurs. I consider anybody that has a dream and they want to go for it an entrepreneur. What are the top three things you would suggest to me to make non-negotiable?
First of all, I think everyone needs to look within themselves and find their strengths, and really find not strengths that they perceive other people to think are strengths, but what they feel are their strengths. Because once you start to form your presentation, your business plan around who you are, it gives you the ability to present with that much more authenticity and conviction that you'll become more successful. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out and play to your strengths. The second, I think, is to embrace that never being content is actually a good thing. I think that we all will naturally want to evolve and achieve more. And I think that that's what drives success and also ambition. So that would be the second. And then third is just to be very true to yourself, to be honest, to have integrity, and never put the sale before compromising yourself or your clients.
Beautiful sentiments and suggestions and advice. And where the rubber meets the road, from my perspective, is the investment of time into each one of those things to make sure they become not only touch points, but really home bases that we take with us into any environment that we go. And the more we are clear about what is our priority in our own life, it becomes so much easier to recognize when we're on course and off course. Well, Neyshia, I thank you so much for joining us. We can follow you on Instagram at Neyshia Go, yes?
Yep.
And if you have any questions, direct message Neyshia. This recording will be on my YouTube account, Nick Segal, on my channel. And it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Any parting closing remarks you'd like to share with everybody?
I just want to touch on this again. If you feel that the pandemic is almost over, it's not. And even if it was, it shouldn't dissuade anyone from not taking this time to find stillness, to be able to really define what they want and where they want to go. I was just on the phone with a friend right before I came in and started today, and I said to her, I said, what do you want? What do you want in your life? Where do you want to go? And she said, oh, well, I've been floating around this pandemic. I'm not sure what I said, well, take some time. You've got plenty of it right now, and find direction, because I think it's a really good opportunity. There's still time, and yeah, that's kind of what I want to say.
I love it. I love it. Thank you all for watching and tuning in. And as I say, this will be recorded tomorrow and posted, and you can get a refresher or share it with somebody. And stay tuned next week for Negotiate This. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.